The dust-laden wind carried the murmurs of the crowd as Zara Matthews strained against the rope binding her wrists, her heart pounding with the ferocity of a thunderstorm. At 22 years old, she never imagined she would end up on an auction block in the unforgiving territory of Arizona, 1878, being sold like cattle to the highest bidder. The death of her parents had left her with nothing but debts and a merciless creditor who saw her as nothing more than property to be traded. $5 for the girl. A voice called out from the crowd, followed by laughter and crude remarks about her slender figure and copper-brown hair that tumbled down her back despite her attempts to remain dignified. $10. Another shouted, a man with a scar cutting across his left cheek and eyes that made Zara's skin crawl. The auctioneer, a portly man with a handlebar mustache that twitched when he spoke, raised his hand. $10 for this fine young woman. Do I hear 15? Zara closed her eyes, unable to look at the sea of faces staring at her with varying degrees of lust and indifference. She had arrived in Copper Creek just 3 weeks ago, hoping to make a new start after her parents' passing, only to discover that her father's gambling debts had followed her west. 15 cents, a deep voice called out, cutting through the noise of the crowd. A hush fell over the gathering, followed by snickers and whispers. 15 cents was an insulting bid, less than the price of a meal at the local saloon. Zara's eyes snapped open, searching for the source of the voice. 15 cents. The auctioneer repeated incredulously. Sir, perhaps you misunderstand the nature of this auction. A tall figure stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. Broad-shouldered and dust-covered from the trail, he wore a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt and a hat pulled low over his eyes. When he tilted his head up, Zara saw a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of a summer sky and a jaw shadowed with several days' worth of stubble. I understand perfectly, the stranger said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent square. But I also understand that no human being should be auctioned off like property. So I'm offering 15 cents as a statement of what I think of this whole proceeding. The auctioneer's face flushed red with anger. Now see here, $500, the stranger interrupted, pulling a leather pouch from his vest. $500 to end this auction right now, gasps rippled through the crowd. $500 was a small fortune in these parts, enough to buy prime grazing land or a decent-sized herd of cattle. The stranger strode forward, boots kicking up dust as he approached the platform. He stopped at the base of the wooden steps and looked up at Zara. For the first time since the auction began, she felt something other than fear, a flicker of hope, perhaps, or at least curiosity about this man who had just offered such an outrageous sum. "What's your name?" he asked her directly, ignoring the auctioneer's sputtering protests. "Zara Matthews," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded once, then turned to the auctioneer. $500 for Miss Matthews' freedom, not ownership freedom. Do we have a deal? The auctioneer looked to the town sheriff, who stood at the edge of the gathering with his thumbs hooked in his belt. After a moment of consideration, the lawman gave a slight nod. "Sold," the auctioneer declared, unable to hide his satisfaction at the unexpected windfall. "To the gentleman for $500. The stranger counted out the money and handed it over, then climbed the steps to where Zara stood. He pulled a knife from his boot and cut the ropes binding her wrists. "Thank you," she whispered as the rough fibers fell away, leaving angry red marks on her skin. "Don't thank me yet," he replied quietly. "We still need to get out of here." He guided her down the steps with a gentle hand at her elbow, ignoring the stares and mutters from the dispersing crowd. Zara felt dizzy with relief and confusion, wondering what this man wanted from her and what price she would ultimately pay for this rescue. As they reached the edge of the square, the scarred man who had bid $10 stepped into their path. "That wasn't fair dealing, cowboy," he growled. "I had plans for that girl. The stranger's posture shifted subtly, and Zara felt tension radiating from him like heat from a stove. "The lady is no longer for sale," he said evenly. "Best move along." The scarred man's hand drifted toward the gun at his hip, but something in the stranger's steady gaze made him reconsider. With a final glare at Zara that promised this wasn't over, he spat in the dust and stalked away. Only when they had walked several blocks toward the livery stable did Zara find her voice again. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Why would you spend so much money on someone you don't even know?" The stranger stopped and turned to her. In the late afternoon light, she could see the fine lines around his eyes and the weariness etched into his features. "Because when I heard what was happening in the square today, I couldn't just ride on by," he said simply. "And when I saw you standing there with your head held high despite everything. Well, some things in this world are priceless, Miss Matthews. Your freedom is one of them." Zara swallowed hard against the lump forming in her throat. "I can't repay you, not that amount." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'm not asking you to." "Then what do you want from me?" The smile faded, replaced by a seriousness that made her stomach tighten. "Nothing you're not willing to give. I have a ranch about 2 days' ride from here. I can offer you a job as a housekeeper if you want it, or I can give you enough money to take the stage to wherever you'd like to go. The choice is yours." Zara studied him, searching for any sign of deception or hidden intentions, but all she saw was fatigue and what appeared to be genuine concern. "I don't even know your name," she said finally. He removed his hat, revealing hair the color of wheat touched by sun. "Thomas Reeves," he said with a slight bow of his head. "Most folks call me Tucker." "Tucker," she repeated, testing the name. What choice did she really have? She had no money, no family, and now, thanks to the spectacle at the auction, no prospect of respectable employment in Copper Creek. "I accept your offer of work, Mr. Reeves." Tucker nodded and replaced his hat. "Good. We'll stay at the hotel tonight, separate rooms," he added quickly when he saw the alarm flash across her face. "We'll get supplies in the morning and head out at first light." As they continued toward the livery to check on his horse, Zara couldn't help wondering if she had just traded one form of servitude for another. But something about Tucker Reeves, about the way he had declared her freedom priceless, made her willing to take that chance. Tucker secured 2 rooms at the Copper Creek Hotel, a 2-story building that was the most respectable establishment in town. After ensuring Zara was settled in her room, he went to purchase her some necessities, a change of clothes, a coat for the journey, and other personal items she might need. The shopkeeper's wife, a kindly woman named Mrs. Holloway, helped gather appropriate items for a young woman. "Is she your sister?" the woman asked, her curiosity evident but her tone polite. "No," Tucker replied. "She's a friend who's fallen on hard times, Mrs." Holloway nodded, understanding in her eyes. News traveled fast in small towns. The poor dear, it wasn't right what they were doing to her, not right at all. Tucker paid for the purchases and thanked the woman for her discretion before returning to the hotel. He knocked on Zara's door and handed her the packages when she opened it just wide enough to see who was there. "Thank you," she said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "For everything." "We'll have supper in an hour if that suits you," he replied. "The dining room downstairs is supposed to be decent." Zara nodded, and Tucker retreated to his own room to wash away the dust of travel. As he splashed water on his face from the basin, he caught his reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. What was he doing? Taking responsibility for a young woman he didn't know, bringing her to his ranch. His brother Levy would have plenty to say about that when they arrived, but he couldn't have left her there, not after what had happened to Sarah. The memory of his sister, sold to pay their father's debts and dead within a year from mistreatment, still haunted him. He had been too young to save Sarah then, but he wasn't too young now, and he had the means to make a difference for Zara Matthews. An hour later, Zara appeared in the hotel dining room wearing one of the new dresses Tucker had purchased, a simple blue calico that complemented her eyes. She had washed her face and pinned her hair up in a modest style. Several male diners turned to look at her as she entered, but she kept her gaze fixed on Tucker, who stood to pull out her chair. "You look refreshed," he said as they sat down. "I feel human again," she replied with a small smile. "Thank you for the clothes. I'll work hard to repay everything." Tucker shook his head. "Let's get something straight right now, Miss Matthews. What happened today was wrong. I didn't help you expecting repayment. Yes, I'm offering you a job, but that's separate from today's events." Zara studied him across the table. "Why were you in Copper Creek today, Mr. Reeves?" "Tucker, please," he corrected. "I was delivering some horses to a buyer north of town. I'm heading back to my ranch now." "And where is your ranch exactly?" "About 40 miles southwest of here, in a valley near the Dragoon Mountains. It's called Clearwater Ranch on account of the spring that runs through the property." The waitress arrived to take their order, and conversation paused while they selected their meals. When they were alone again, Zara leaned forward slightly. "Do you live there alone?" she asked, then flushed. "I'm sorry, that's impertinent of me." Tucker smiled. "It's a fair question. No, my younger brother Levy lives there too, and we have 3 ranch hands who help with the cattle and horses. The house is large enough that you'll have your own room and plenty of privacy." Zara nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "What would my duties be exactly?" "Cooking, cleaning, mending the usual household tasks. The place has been without a woman's touch since our housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, moved to Tucson to live with her daughter last winter. We've been managing, but—" he shrugged. "I won't lie, we could use the help." Their food arrived, beef stew and fresh bread for both of them, and they ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Tucker couldn't help noticing how Zara ate with careful, measured bites despite what must have been considerable hunger. She had good manners, suggesting a decent upbringing before whatever circumstances had led her to today's auction block. "May I ask what brought you to Arizona?" Tucker ventured after a while. Zara set down her spoon and dabbed at her mouth with a napkin. "My parents died 6 months ago, influenza. I discovered afterward that my father had gambling debts I knew nothing about. Our home in St. Louis was sold to pay the creditors, but it wasn't enough. I came west hoping for a fresh start, but—" she shook her head. "One of the creditors tracked me down. He said I was responsible for the remaining debt." "That's not legal," Tucker said, anger creeping into his voice. "Perhaps not, but the local justice of the peace seemed to agree with him. I had no money and no one to speak for me." Her eyes, the color of twilight, met his across the table. "Until you." Tucker felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest at her words. He cleared his throat. "Well, that's behind you now. No one at Clearwater will treat you as anything but a respected employee and hopefully, in time, a friend." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I'd like that." They finished their meal and Tucker walked Zara back to her room. At her door, she turned to face him. "One more question, if I may," she said. "When you first bid, you offered 15 cents. Why such an odd amount?" Tucker's expression darkened momentarily. "To make a point about the value those men were placing on a human life. But the truth is, Miss Matthews, you're priceless. What happened today should never happen to anyone." Zara looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good night, Tucker. Thank you for today." "Good night, Zara. Rest well. We have a long ride ahead of us tomorrow." As Tucker walked to his own room, he found himself wondering what he had gotten himself into. Clearwater Ranch had been a peaceful, if sometimes lonely, existence for the past 5 years. Bringing Zara Matthews into his home was sure to disrupt that peace, but perhaps, he reflected as he removed his boots and stretched out on the bed, some disruptions were worth enduring. Dawn broke with a symphony of birdsong and the distant sound of horses being readied for the day's journeys. Zara woke early, having slept fitfully despite her exhaustion. The reality of her situation kept intruding on her attempts at rest. She was now beholden to a man she had just met, traveling to a remote ranch where she would be dependent on his continued goodwill. Yet something about Tucker Reeves inspired trust. Perhaps it was the way he looked at her not as property or even as a woman to be desired, but as a person worthy of respect. Or perhaps it was simply that she had no other options. She dressed in the practical riding skirt and jacket Tucker had purchased for her, grateful for the sturdy boots and thick stockings that would protect her from the rigors of the trail. After pinning her hair in a simple knot at the nape of her neck, she gathered her few possessions in the carpet bag Mrs. Holloway had included with her purchases. A knock at her door announced Tucker's arrival. "Breakfast is being served downstairs," he said when she opened the door. "We should eat before we head out." Over eggs, bacon, and strong coffee, Tucker outlined their journey. "We'll follow the San Pedro River south for most of today, then cut west toward the mountains tomorrow. If the weather holds and we make good time, we should reach Clearwater by tomorrow evening." "Have you lived there long?" Zara asked, curious about the man who had so dramatically altered her fate. Tucker nodded. 5 years now. Levy and I bought the place after we mustered out of the army. We served with the cavalry during the last years of the war. You fought for the Union." "Yes, though we're originally from Kentucky. Our father owned a small horse farm there." A shadow crossed his face. "After he died, there wasn't much left to keep us there." Zara sensed there was more to that story, but Tucker's tone discouraged further questions. Instead, she asked about the ranch and the work they did there. Tucker's expression brightened as he described Clearwater. "We raise cattle, but horses are our specialty. I've always had a way with them, even as a boy. We breed and train them for all purposes: ranch work, carriage teams, even racing stock. It's good, honest work." After breakfast, they collected the supplies Tucker had purchased the previous day: food for the journey, a canteen for Zara, and a few other necessities. At the livery stable, Tucker led out a tall chestnut gelding with a white blaze. "This is Rusty," he said, patting the horse's neck. "He's been my companion for many miles." A smaller bay mare stood nearby, already saddled. "And this is Willow. She's steady and gentle, a good mount for our journey." Zara approached the mare cautiously. "She's beautiful," she said, stroking the horse's velvet nose. "But I should warn you, I haven't ridden much since I was a girl." "Willow will take care of you," Tucker assured her. "Just follow my lead and tell me if you need to rest." He helped Zara mount and adjusted her stirrups before swinging up onto Rusty's back with the ease of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. They rode out of Copper Creek at a leisurely pace, Tucker not wanting to tire Zara or the horses before the long journey ahead. As the town fell away behind them, Zara felt a strange mixture of apprehension and relief. She was leaving behind the humiliation of the auction block, but riding toward an uncertain future with a man who remained largely a mystery. The landscape opened up before them, rolling hills covered in scrub, brush, and cacti, with mountains rising blue and distant on the horizon. The April sun was warm but not yet oppressive, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of desert blooms. "It's beautiful," Zara said after they had ridden in silence for a while. "Different from Missouri, but beautiful in its own way." Tucker glanced at her, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "It grows on you. When I first came west, I thought it was the most desolate place I'd ever seen. Now I can't imagine living anywhere else." They rode steadily through the morning, Tucker pointing out landmarks and naming plants and wildlife they encountered. Zara found herself relaxing in his company, the tension of the previous day gradually easing from her shoulders. Around midday, they stopped in the shade of a stand of cottonwood trees near the river. Tucker helped Zara dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Her legs were already beginning to ache from the unaccustomed activity, but she was determined not to complain. "We'll rest here for a bit," Tucker said, tethering the horses where they could drink from the river. "Are you hungry?" Zara nodded, and they sat on a fallen log while Tucker unpacked bread, cheese, and dried apples from his saddlebags. As they ate, a comfortable silence settled between them. "May I ask you something personal?" Zara ventured after a while. Tucker raised an eyebrow. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Fair enough," she said with a small smile. "Have you ever been married?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for so long that Zara thought he wasn't going to answer. "No," he said finally. "Never found the right woman, I suppose, or maybe I never looked hard enough." He took a drink from his canteen. "What about you? Was there someone back in Missouri?" Zara shook her head. "There was a young man who called on me for a time, but after my parents died and our situation became known, well, his interest cooled considerably." Tucker's jaw tightened. "His loss," he said simply. They continued their journey through the afternoon, following the meandering course of the San Pedro River. As the day wore on, Zara found it increasingly difficult to maintain her posture in the saddle. Her muscles protested the unaccustomed activity, and by the time Tucker called a halt for the night, she was gritting her teeth against the pain. "There's a good spot to camp just ahead," Tucker said, pointing to a clearing near a bend in the river. "We'll stop there for the night." When they reached the clearing, Tucker dismounted in one fluid motion, then moved to help Zara. As his hands encircled her waist to lift her down, she couldn't suppress a wince. "Saddle sore?" he asked, his voice sympathetic. "A bit," she admitted. "It's been years since I've ridden this long." "Walking will help," he suggested. "Why don't you stretch your legs while I set up camp?" Zara nodded gratefully and began a slow circuit of the clearing while Tucker unsaddled the horses and gathered wood for a fire. By the time she returned, he had a small blaze going and was laying out bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. "I hope you don't mind sleeping under the stars," he said. "The weather's mild and there's no rain in the forecast." "It's fine," Zara assured him, though in truth, she felt a flutter of nervousness at the thought of spending the night in such close proximity to a man she barely knew. As if sensing her discomfort, Tucker said, "I'll sleep on the other side of the fire, and I'm a light sleeper." "You'll be safe with me, Zara. You have my word." The sincerity in his voice eased her concern somewhat. After a simple supper of beans, bacon, and coffee, they sat by the fire as darkness settled over the land. The stars emerged, brilliant against the black velvet of the sky, more numerous than Zara had ever seen in the city. "It's magnificent," she breathed, gazing upward. Tucker followed her gaze. "One of the benefits of living out here, you never feel alone with all those stars for company." "Do you get lonely at the ranch?" she asked. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "Sometimes. Levy's good company and the hands keep things lively, but," he shrugged, "there are moments when I wish for something more." The firelight cast his features in gold and shadow, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the thoughtful set of his mouth. Zara found herself wondering what it would be like to be the one who filled that emptiness for him, then quickly banished the thought. She was going to be his employee, nothing more. "We should get some rest," Tucker said, breaking the moment. "We have another long day tomorrow." Zara nodded and moved to her bedroll, suddenly aware of how isolated they were. Tucker banked the fire and checked on the horses one last time before settling on his own bedroll across the flames. "Good night, Zara," he said softly. "Good night, Tucker," she replied, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. Every unfamiliar sound of the desert night startled her: the call of an owl, the rustling of some small creature in the brush, the occasional distant howl of a coyote. But eventually, lulled by the steady rhythm of Tucker's breathing and the gentle murmur of the river, she drifted into slumber. She dreamed of auction blocks and desperate faces, of ropes around her wrists and leering men with outstretched hands. In her dream, she cried out for help, but no one came. No one except a shadowy figure who stood at the edge of the crowd, watching with eyes that seemed to see into her soul. Zara woke with a start, her heart pounding. The fire had burned down to embers, casting just enough light for her to make out Tucker's form across from her. He was sitting up, alert and watchful. "Bad dream?" he asked quietly. She nodded, embarrassed. "I'm sorry if I woke you." "You didn't." "I was already awake." He added a few small branches to the fire, coaxing it back to life. "Do you want to talk about it?" Zara drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders against the night's chill. "It was about yesterday. About what might have happened if you hadn't been there." Tucker's expression was grave in the flickering light. But I was there. And nothing like that is going to happen to you again, not while I have anything to say about it. The conviction in his voice warmed her more than the rekindled fire. Why do you care so much about what happens to me? I'm a stranger to you. Tucker was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. When he spoke, his voice was low and strained. I had a sister once, Sarah. She was older than me by 5 years. After our mother died, our father's gambling got worse. One night he lost everything including Sarah. She was 17. His hands clenched into fists. I was only 12, too young to stop it. They took her away and I never saw her again. I found out years later that she died within a year, worked to death on a plantation in Louisiana. Zara's throat tightened with emotion. I'm so sorry, Tucker, he nodded, not meeting her eyes. When I saw you on that auction block, looking so defiant despite everything, I couldn't walk away. Not again. Impulsively, Zara rose and moved around the fire to sit beside him. She placed her hand over his clenched fist. Thank you for telling me, and thank you for what you did. Tucker looked down at her hand on his, then slowly uncurled his fingers to clasp hers. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. We should try to get some more sleep, he said after a moment. Dawn comes early out here. Zara returned to her bedroll, but before she lay down, she looked back at Tucker. For what it's worth, I think Sarah would be proud of the man you've become. In the flickering firelight, she thought she saw his eyes glisten briefly before he nodded and turned away. This time when Zara closed her eyes, no nightmares came to disturb her rest. Morning arrived with a spectacular display of color as the sun rose over the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Zara woke to the aroma of coffee brewing and the sound of Tucker moving quietly around the camp. Good morning, he greeted her when he saw she was awake. How did you sleep? Better, thank you, she replied, sitting up and running a hand through her tangled hair. She was acutely aware of how disheveled she must look after a night sleeping on the ground. Tucker handed her a tin cup of steaming coffee. There's a bend in the river just through those trees, he said, gesturing to a thicket of mesquite. It's private if you want to freshen up. I'll get breakfast started. Grateful for his thoughtfulness, Zara took her carpet bag and made her way to the spot he had indicated. The river ran clear and cool, and though the water was cold, it was refreshing against her skin. She washed as best she could, then changed into fresh clothes and rebraided her hair. When she returned to camp, Tucker had bacon sizzling in a small pan and biscuits warming near the fire. He glanced up as she approached, and something in his expression made her heart skip a beat. Feel better? He asked, turning his attention back to the bacon. Much, she replied, settling on a fallen log near the fire. Can I help with anything? Tucker shook his head. It's just about ready. We'll eat, pack up, and be on our way. I'd like to make it to Clearwater before dark. They ate quickly, then worked together to break camp. Zara noticed that Tucker was careful to show her what he was doing and explain why, teaching her the ways of trail life without making her feel ignorant. By the time they were mounted and ready to ride, the sun was fully above the horizon, promising another clear, warm day. The second day of travel was easier in some ways and harder in others. Zara was growing accustomed to the rhythm of riding, but her muscles protested the renewed activity. The landscape gradually changed as they left the river and turned west toward the mountains, becoming more rugged and dramatic. Stands of oak and juniper appeared among the desert plants, and the air grew cooler as they gained elevation. Tucker kept up a steady conversation, telling Zara about the land they were passing through and sharing stories of his experiences in the territory. She learned that he had served as a scout for the army after the war, that he had a gift for languages and could speak passable Spanish and Apache, and that he had once tracked a mountain lion for 3 days to protect a neighbor's livestock. You've led quite a life, she commented during one of their rest stops. Tucker smiled, the expression transforming his face from handsome to breathtaking. I've been fortunate in many ways. The West gives a man room to reinvent himself, to become whoever he wants to be. And who did you want to be? Zara asked. His smile faded slightly. Someone my sister would have been proud of, someone who stands up for what's right even when it's not easy or popular. He looked at her directly. What about you, Zara Matthews? Who do you want to be now that you have the chance to decide for yourself? The question caught her off guard. Since her parents' deaths, she had been focused solely on survival, with no time to consider what she truly wanted from life. I'm not sure, she admitted. For now, I'd settle for being someone who can take care of herself and not be at the mercy of others. Tucker nodded thoughtfully. That's a good starting point, and you'll have time at Clearwater to figure out the rest. As the afternoon wore on, the Dragoon Mountains loomed larger before them, their rugged peaks sharp against the sky. Tucker pointed to a pass between two ridges. Clearwater Valley lies just beyond that pass, he said. We're almost home. The word home sent an unexpected pang through Zara's heart. She had been without a true home since her parents' deaths, moving from one temporary lodging to another as her circumstances grew increasingly desperate. The thought of having a stable place to live, even as a servant, filled her with both longing and trepidation. They entered the pass as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The trail narrowed, winding between stone walls that rose high on either side. Tucker led the way, occasionally glancing back to ensure Zara was managing the more difficult terrain. This pass has quite a history, he told her. The Apache used it for centuries before white settlers arrived. There are cave paintings further up that are said to be hundreds of years old. Is it safe? Zara asked, glancing uneasily at the shadowed recesses among the rocks. The army established peace with the local tribes a few years back, Tucker replied. We've had good relations with them at Clearwater. Their chief, Nate, is a fair man who keeps his word. As they emerged from the pass, the valley opened before them, a green jewel nestled among the rugged mountains. Fields of spring grass stretched toward a cluster of buildings in the distance, with a creek winding like a silver ribbon through the center of the valley. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and a herd of horses moved like a flowing tide across an open meadow. It's beautiful, Zara breathed, reining in her horse to take in the view. Tucker smiled, pride evident in his expression. Welcome to Clearwater Ranch. They rode down into the valley as the setting sun bathed everything in golden light. As they approached the ranch buildings, Zara could see a main house built of adobe and timber, a large barn, several corrals, and a few smaller outbuildings. A bunkhouse stood a short distance from the main house, and smoke rose from chimneys in both structures. A figure emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. After a moment, he raised an arm in greeting and strode toward them. That's Levy, Tucker said. My brother. As they drew closer, Zara could see the family resemblance. Levy Reeves was slightly shorter than Tucker but shared the same wheat-colored hair and strong features. His expression, however, was less guarded, his smile coming easily as they approached. About time you got back, Levy called out. We were starting to wonder if you'd decided to settle in Copper Creek. Tucker dismounted and clasped his brother's hand. Had a bit of a detour, he said, then turned to help Zara down from her horse. Levy's eyebrows rose as he noticed Zara for the first time. I can see that, he said, curiosity evident in his voice. Levy, this is Miss Zara Matthews, Tucker said formally. She'll be taking over Mrs. Finch's duties at the house. Zara, my brother Levy. Levy removed his hat and gave a slight bow. Miss Matthews, it's a pleasure to meet you. We've been in dire need of someone to civilize this place again. Thank you for the welcome, Mr. Reeves, Zara replied, aware of how dusty and travel-worn she must appear. I look forward to helping restore some order to your home. Just Levy, please, he said with a warm smile. We don't stand on ceremony much out here. A call from the direction of the bunkhouse drew their attention. 3 men were approaching, curiosity evident in their expressions. The ranch hands, Tucker explained to Zara. Miguel Hernandez, our foreman, and Jack Willis and Charlie Green. Introductions were made all around, with the men tipping their hats respectfully to Zara. Miguel, A middle-aged man with a weathered face and kind eyes spoke with a slight Spanish accent. "Welcome to Clearwater, Miss Matthews. It will be good to have a lady in the house again." "Thank you," Zara replied, feeling slightly overwhelmed by all the new faces. Tucker seemed to sense her fatigue. "I'll show Zara to the house," he said to the others. "We've been on the trail for 2 days, and I'm sure she'd like to rest." With a hand lightly at her elbow, Tucker guided Zara toward the main house, leaving Levy to take care of the horses. As they walked, Zara couldn't help noticing the sidelong glances the men exchanged, clearly curious about her sudden appearance. "They seem nice," she said quietly. "They're good men," Tucker agreed. "Loyal and hardworking. They might be curious about you at first, but they'll respect your privacy." The main house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, built in a U-shape around a central courtyard with a well and several fruit trees. Tucker led her through a heavy wooden door into a spacious central room that served as both entryway and living area. A large fireplace dominated one wall, with comfortable-looking furniture arranged before it. The floors were smooth, polished wood, partially covered by colorful woven rugs. "It's lovely," Zara said, genuinely impressed. She had expected something far more rustic. "Mrs. Finch insisted on making it comfortable," Tucker explained, setting down Zara's carpet bag. "She said a house should feel like a home, not just a place to sleep between work days." He gestured toward a hallway. "The kitchen and dining room are through there, and this way are the bedrooms." He led her down another hallway to a room at the back of the house. "This will be your room," he said, opening the door. The bedroom was simply but comfortably furnished, with a bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a small dresser, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a rocking chair near the window. The window itself looked out over a garden that, though somewhat overgrown, was filled with flowering plants. "It's perfect," Zara said, genuine gratitude in her voice. After weeks of uncertainty and the humiliation of the auction block, having a room of her own felt like an unimaginable luxury. "The bathroom is at the end of the hall," Tucker continued. "We're fortunate to have indoor plumbing. Levy insisted on it when we built the place. There should be hot water if you'd like to bathe. I'll have one of the hands bring your bath water while I see about getting some supper together." "You don't have to cook," Zara protested. "I can start my duties right away." Tucker shook his head. "You've had a long journey, rest tonight and you can start fresh in the morning." His expression softened slightly. "This is your home now, Zara. I want you to feel welcome here." With that, he left her alone to settle in. Zara sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the soft quilt. Home. The word echoed in her mind, stirring emotions she had kept carefully contained since her parents' deaths. She wasn't naive enough to believe that working as a housekeeper would be easy. But at least here, she had a chance at a new beginning, a chance to rebuild her life on her own terms. And if her thoughts kept returning to the man who had made it all possible, to the kindness in his eyes and the strength in his hands as he helped her from her horse, well, that was something she would have to deal with in her own time. True to his word, Tucker arranged for hot water to be brought to the bathroom. After 2 days on the trail, the bath was heavenly, washing away not just the dust of travel but some of the lingering shame of the auction block. Zara took her time, savoring the luxury of hot water and the lavender-scented soap she found on a shelf near the tub. Afterward, dressed in clean clothes and with her hair freshly combed, she felt renewed. The delicious aroma of cooking food drew her to the kitchen, where she found Tucker standing at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. "Something smells wonderful," she said from the doorway. Tucker turned, and for a moment he simply looked at her, an expression in his eyes that made her breath catch. "You look rested," he said finally. "The bath helped?" "Immensely," she replied, moving into the kitchen. "What are you making?" "Beef stew," he said, returning his attention to the pot. "Nothing fancy, but filling after a long ride. Levy's bringing in fresh bread from town. He rode over to Williams' General Store while you were bathing." "May I help?" Zara asked, feeling awkward standing idle while her employer cooked. Tucker hesitated, then nodded toward a cabinet. Plates and cutlery are in there if you want to set the table. Dining rooms through that door. Zara busied herself with the familiar task, grateful to have something useful to do. The dining room was comfortable but clearly designed for practicality rather than show, with a solid oak table that could seat 8 and straight-back chairs that showed signs of long use. As she arranged plates and silverware, Levy returned, bringing not only bread but a jar of preserves, and a small cake that he said came from Mrs. Williams, the storekeeper's wife. When I mentioned we had a new housekeeper, she insisted on sending something to welcome you, Levy explained, setting the cake on the sideboard. The Williams are good neighbors. Their place is about 3 miles east of here. That's very kind of her, Zara said, touched by the gesture. Folks look out for each other out here, Levy replied with a smile. It's how we all survive. Dinner was a pleasant affair, with conversation flowing easily between the brothers. They made efforts to include Zara, explaining the workings of the ranch and telling stories about their lives there, but never pressing her when she grew quiet. She learned that they had about 200 head of cattle and 30 horses, with plans to expand their horse breeding operation in the coming year. Tucker has a way with horses like I've never seen, Levy said, helping himself to more stew. He can gentle the wildest Mustang in half the time it takes most men. Tucker looked embarrassed by the praise. Levy exaggerates, I just have patience, that's all. And a natural gift, Levy insisted. You should see him work, Zara, it's something to behold. After dinner, despite Zara's protests that she should help clean up, the brothers insisted she retire early to recover from the journey. Your work starts tomorrow, Tucker said firmly. Tonight you're still our guest. Grateful for their consideration, Zara bid them good night and retreated to her room. Through the open window, she could hear the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the occasional whinny of a horse, the rustle of wind through the trees in the courtyard. Different from the city sounds she had grown up with, but somehow soothing. As she lay in the comfortable bed, watching moonlight create patterns on the ceiling, Zara reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she had been facing a future of servitude or worse, standing on an auction block with men bidding for her as if she were livestock. Now she was in a comfortable home with a respectable position, all because a stranger had decided she was worth saving. Not just any stranger, though. Tucker Reeves, with his quiet strength and haunted eyes. A man who had seen his sister sold and had been powerless to stop it, who now ran a successful ranch with his brother and treated his workers with respect. A man who had looked at her in the kitchen tonight with an expression that suggested he saw more than just a housekeeper when he looked at her. Zara closed her eyes, pushing away that dangerous line of thought. She was here to work, to rebuild her life, not to indulge in foolish romantic notions about her employer. With that firmly in mind, she drifted off to sleep, too exhausted from the journey to stay awake despite the unfamiliar surroundings. Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the sound of activity in the yard. Zara woke feeling refreshed and eager to begin her new duties. She dressed quickly in one of the simple work dresses Tucker had purchased for her and pinned her hair in a practical style before making her way to the kitchen. To her surprise, Tucker was already there, coffee brewing on the stove and bacon sizzling in a pan. He looked up as she entered, a smile warming his features. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, moving to the stove. "But you shouldn't be cooking, that's my job now." Tucker stepped back, surrendering the spatula with a mock bow. "All yours, Miss Matthews. I was just getting things started. The men will be in for breakfast soon. They like to eat early before the day's work begins." "How many should I expect?" "5 in total, Levy and me, plus Miguel, Jack, and Charlie." They usually have a big breakfast and a light midday meal, then a hearty supper after the day's work is done. Zara nodded, mentally calculating quantities as she surveyed the kitchen's supplies. In addition to the bacon Tucker had started, she found eggs, flour for biscuits, and potatoes that could be fried. It would be a simple meal but filling. "Is there anything else I should know about running the household?" she asked as she worked. Tucker leaned against the counter, watching her with those perceptive blue eyes. Mrs. Finch left a ledger in the pantry with notes about supplies, menus, and such. Laundry day was traditionally Monday with baking on Tuesday, but you're free to establish your own routine. And my other duties. You mentioned cleaning and mending. The house has been kept up reasonably well, but it could use a woman's touch again. As for mending, well. He gestured ruefully at his shirt, which Zara now noticed had a tear along one seam. "We've been doing what we can, but none of us is particularly skilled with a needle." Zara smiled at that. "I'm a fair hand at sewing. My mother taught me well." The kitchen door swung open, and Levy entered, followed by the three ranch hands. All removed their hats as they came in, nodding respectfully to Zara. "Something smells mighty fine, Miss Matthews," Charlie said, a young man with freckles across his nose and a ready smile. "It'll be ready shortly," she promised. "There's coffee if you'd like some while you wait." The men helped themselves to coffee and settled around the large kitchen table, discussing the day's work ahead. Zara listened as she cooked, learning that they were planning to move a herd of cattle to new pasture, and that Tucker was expecting a buyer from Tucson to look at some horses later in the week. By the time she served breakfast, crispy bacon, fried eggs, golden biscuits, and potatoes seasoned with onions, Zara felt she had a better understanding of the ranch's operations and her place within it. The men ate heartily, complimenting her cooking and treating her with a respect that eased her remaining concerns about her position here. After breakfast, the men headed out to begin their day's work, leaving Zara to clean up the kitchen and explore the rest of the house. She found Mrs. Finch's ledger exactly where Tucker had said it would be, and spent an hour familiarizing herself with the previous housekeeper's notes and methods. The morning passed quickly as Zara established herself in her new domain. She swept and dusted the main rooms, took inventory of the pantry, and made a list of supplies that would be needed soon. Around midday, she prepared a light lunch of sandwiches and cold cider, which the men appreciated when they came in from the morning's work. In the afternoon, Zara turned her attention to mending. She found a basket of clothes in need of repair in a closet off the main hallway, along with sewing supplies. Settling in the living room where the light was good, she began working through the pile, starting with Tucker's torn shirt. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the front door open. When a shadow fell across her work, she looked up to find Tucker watching her, his expression unreadable. "You've been busy," he said, nodding toward the neat pile of mended clothes beside her. "There was quite a backlog," she replied, setting aside the shirt she had been working on. "How was your day?" "Productive. We moved the herd to the north pasture and I worked with the new colt for a while." He hesitated, then added, "I'd like to show you around the ranch when you have time. You should know your way around in case you need anything when Levy and I are out with the herds." "I'd like that," Zara said, genuinely interested in seeing more of Clearwater. "Perhaps tomorrow afternoon. I'll be working with some horses in the morning, but I could spare a few hours after lunch." "That would be perfect. I should have the house in order by then." Tucker nodded, seemingly pleased. "I'll leave you to your work then, unless you need anything." Zara shook her head. "I'm managing just fine, thank you." After he left, Zara found herself staring at the doorway where he had stood, a strange feeling stirring in her chest. There was something about Tucker Reeves that drew her, something beyond gratitude for his rescue or appreciation of his kindness. Something that made her pulse quicken when he was near, and her thoughts drift to him when he wasn't. Pushing such reflections aside, Zara returned to her mending, determined to focus on her duties and not on inappropriate feelings for her employer. She was here to work, to rebuild her life and her independence. Romance had no place in that plan, especially not with a man who had already done more for her than she could ever repay. The next few days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Zara rose early to prepare breakfast for the men, spent the mornings cleaning and organizing the house, prepared lunch, and devoted the afternoons to various tasks mending, baking, or working in the neglected garden behind the house. The evenings were spent preparing and serving dinner, after which she usually retired to her room to read one of the books from the small shelf Tucker had told her she was welcome to use. True to his word, Tucker took her on a tour of the ranch the day after her arrival. Mounted on the gentle mare Willow, with Tucker beside her on Rusty, Zara saw the full extent of Clearwater Ranch from the fertile pastures where the cattle grazed to the higher meadows where the horses roamed. From the creek that gave the ranch its name to the boundaries where Clearwater met neighboring properties. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined," she said as they paused on a ridge overlooking the valley. Spring had painted the landscape in shades of green and gold, with wildflowers adding splashes of color among the grasses. "It's home," Tucker said simply, but the pride in his voice was unmistakable. "Levy and I have put everything we have into this place." "It shows," Zara replied. "You've built something wonderful here." Tucker glanced at her, a hint of vulnerability in his expression. "Do you think you could be happy here, Zara, as our housekeeper, I mean?" The question caught her off guard. Yes, I think I could. Everyone has been kind and the work suits me." She hesitated, then asked a question of her own. "Why did you really bring me here, Tucker?" "You could have given me money for the stage and sent me on my way." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "I told you about my sister, Sarah," he said finally. "What I didn't tell you is that I've spent years trying to make up for not being able to save her. When I saw you on that auction block," he shook his head. "It wasn't just about Sarah, though, it was about you too. There was something in your eyes, a strength, a defiance despite everything. I wanted to give that strength a chance to flourish." The honesty of his answer moved her deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for saving me, but for really seeing me when everyone else just saw property to be bought and sold." Their eyes met, and for a breathless moment, Zara thought Tucker might say more, but he simply nodded and turned his horse back toward the ranch. "We should head back. I promised Levy I'd help him with the new fencing this afternoon." The tour marked a turning point in their relationship. Though Tucker maintained a respectful distance, Zara often caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice. For her part, she found herself looking forward to the moments when their paths crossed during the day, bringing him coffee while he worked in the barn, passing him in the hallway, or sitting across from him at meals. Levy noticed, of course. One evening about 2 weeks after Zara's arrival, he cornered her in the kitchen as she was washing the dinner dishes. "You're good for him, you know," he said without preamble, picking up a towel to dry the plates she had washed. "I'm not sure what you mean," Zara replied, though her flushed cheeks betrayed her understanding. Levy smiled knowingly. "Tucker's been carrying around a weight ever since Sarah. He blames himself for what happened to her, though he was just a boy and couldn't have stopped it. He set a dried plate on the stack. But since you came, he's different, lighter somehow, he smiles more." "I'm just doing my job," Zara insisted, scrubbing a pot with more vigor than necessary. "Is that all it is?" Levy asked gently, Zara's hands stilled in the soapy water. "It has to be," she said after a moment. "I'm indebted to him. He saved me from an unthinkable fate. How could anything more between us ever be equal?" Levy was quiet for a moment, thoughtfully drying another plate. "You know, when we first came to Clearwater, this valley was nothing but wild grass and dreams. Tucker said something then that stuck with me. He said, value isn't about what something costs, but what it's worth to you. He wasn't talking about land or cattle or horses. He was talking about people, about connections." He set down the towel and turned to face her directly. "I don't know what's in my brother's heart, Zara, but I do know that when he looks at you, he's not seeing someone who owes him a debt, he's seeing someone priceless." With that, Levy left her alone with her thoughts and the remaining dishes. Zara stood at the sink, her mind whirling with implications and possibilities she had been trying to ignore since her arrival at Clearwater. That night, sleep eluded her. Levy's words kept echoing in her mind, along with memories of Tucker's kindness, his quiet strength, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Was it possible that he felt something for her beyond the satisfaction of having done a good deed, and what of her own feelings? She had been trying to dismiss them as mere gratitude, but in the stillness of the night, Zara was forced to acknowledge a deeper truth. She was falling in love with Tucker Reeves, had perhaps begun falling from the moment he stood up for her dignity in Copper Creek. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. Morning came too soon, bringing with it the usual routines and duties that temporarily pushed such thoughts to the background. Zara was kneading dough for bread when Tucker appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression unusually serious. "Zara, I need to ride into Tucson today on business," he said. "I'll be gone overnight, possibly 2 nights depending on how things go." "Oh," she said, trying to ignore the disappointment that washed over her. "Is everything all right?" "Just some legal matters about water rights that need sorting out," he assured her. "Nothing to worry about. Levy will be here, and the hands know what needs doing." Zara nodded, returning her attention to the dough to hide the confusion of emotions his announcement had stirred. "When will you leave?" "Within the hour. I've already packed what I need." "I'll put together some food for your journey," she said, practical concerns giving her something to focus on. "Thank you," Tucker said, lingering in the doorway as if he wanted to say more. Finally, he simply added, "I'll see you before I go," and left her to her baking. True to his word, Tucker stopped by the kitchen before departing. Zara had prepared a package of sandwiches, dried fruit, and biscuits for his journey, along with a canteen of fresh water. "This is very thoughtful," he said as she handed him the provisions. "Thank you." "It's nothing," she replied, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. "Have a safe journey." Tucker hesitated, then reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear that had escaped from her pins. The brief touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the morning's coolness. "Take care of yourself, Zara," he said softly. "I'll be back as soon as I can." Then he was gone, the sound of Rusty's hooves fading as they rode away from the ranch. Zara stood in the doorway long after he had disappeared from sight, her hand unconsciously touching the spot where his fingers had brushed her cheek. The days of Tucker's absence stretched longer than Zara had anticipated. She kept busy with her duties, finding additional tasks to occupy her mind and hands, cleaning windows that didn't really need it, organizing the pantry that was already in good order, spending extra time in the garden coaxing new life from the neglected beds. Levy watched her with knowing eyes but said nothing more about his brother or Zara's feelings for him. He was a good companion in Tucker's absence, sharing stories of their childhood in Kentucky and their adventures after coming west. Through his tales, Zara began to understand more about the man Tucker had become and the experiences that had shaped him. On the evening of the 3rd day, when Tucker had still not returned, Zara was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Her heart leaped, but she forced herself to continue with her task, not wanting to appear too eager. It was Levy who came to find her, his expression troubled. "Zara, Tucker's back, but he's been hurt." She dropped her trowel, alarm shooting through her. "Hurt? How badly?" "He took a fall when Rusty stepped in a gopher hole about 5 miles back. His right arm's broken and he's got some nasty bruising, but Doc Williams says he'll heal clean with proper rest." Levy's voice was reassuring, but concern lingered in his eyes. "He's being stubborn about it, of course." Rode the rest of the way home despite the pain. Zara was already moving toward the house. "Where is he now?" "In his room. Doc's just finished setting the arm and gave him something for the pain, but he's still awake." Without another word, Zara hurried inside and down the hallway to Tucker's bedroom. She hesitated at the closed door, suddenly uncertain of her place. Was it proper for her, as the housekeeper, to enter her employer's bedroom? But concern overrode propriety and she knocked softly. "Come in," Tucker's voice called, sounding strained. Zara opened the door to find Tucker sitting on the edge of his bed, his right arm in a splint and sling. His face was pale beneath his tan, with lines of pain around his mouth and eyes. Dr. Williams, a gray-haired man with kind eyes, was packing his medical bag. "Ah, Miss Matthews," the doctor said, nodding to her. "Perhaps you can convince this stubborn patient to actually rest, which is what he needs most right now." "I'm fine, Doc," Tucker protested. "It's just a broken arm." "Men work cattle with worse every day." "Not if they want to heal properly, they don't," the doctor retorted, closing his bag with a snap. "2 weeks of rest for that arm, Tucker. No riding, no roping, no lifting anything heavier than a coffee cup. After that, we'll see." He turned to Zara. "I've left some powders for pain if he needs them. 1 in water every 6 hours, no more." "I'll make sure he follows your instructions," Zara promised. When the doctor had gone, escorted out by Levy, Zara moved to Tucker's side. "You gave us quite a scare," she said softly. "How do you feel, truly?" Tucker's attempt at a reassuring smile turned into a grimace. "Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo, but I've had worse." "Let me help you get comfortable," Zara said, moving to adjust his pillows. "You heard the doctor, you need rest." "What I need is to not be treated like an invalid," Tucker grumbled, but he allowed her to help him lie back against the pillows. "I'm sorry to add to your duties, Zara." "Don't be ridiculous," she said, her tone gentler than her words. "Looking after you when you're injured is hardly a burden." Something in his expression softened. "Still, I appreciate it. I'm not used to being cared for." "Then it's high time you learned," Zara replied, pulling a light blanket over him. "Would you like some tea, or perhaps something to eat?" "Tea would be nice," he admitted. "And maybe some of that soup you made yesterday, if there's any left." "I'll bring it right away," she promised, turning to leave. "Zara," Tucker called as she reached the door. When she looked back, his blue eyes were intense despite his obvious fatigue. "I'm glad to be home." The simple statement warmed her more than she cared to admit. "I'm glad you're home too, Tucker," she replied softly. "Rest now. I'll be back soon." In the kitchen, as she prepared a tray with tea and warmed soup, Zara reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. From the humiliation of the auction block to caring for the man who had saved her a man she was increasingly certain she loved in less than a month. Life's paths were unpredictable indeed. Tucker proved to be a difficult patient in the days that followed. Accustomed to constant activity and independence, he chafed at the restrictions his injury imposed. He tried several times to resume his normal duties, only to be thwarted by pain and the combined vigilance of Zara and Levy. "You're the most stubborn man I've ever met," Zara declared after finding him attempting to saddle a horse one-handed 5 days into his convalescence. "I have responsibilities," Tucker retorted, frustration evident in his voice. "The ranch doesn't run itself." "And it won't run at all if you don't heal properly," she countered, taking the saddle from him and returning it to the rack. "Levy and the hands are managing just fine. Your only responsibility right now is to get better." Tucker glared at her, but there was no real anger in his expression, only the frustration of a man used to action being forced into inactivity. "I'm not good at sitting still, Zara," her expression softened. "I know, but please, for your own sake, try." Something in her tone must have reached him, because his shoulders slumped slightly in surrender. "Fine, but I'm going stir-crazy just sitting in the house all day," an idea occurred to Zara. "Then let's go for a walk." Dr. Williams didn't say anything about walking, just no riding or using your arm. Tucker's expression brightened. "I'd like that." They walked together around the ranch yard and into the garden Zara had been restoring. The late May weather was perfect warm sunshine tempered by a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers and sage. "You've done wonders with the garden," Tucker commented as they strolled between rows of vegetables and flowering plants. "Mrs. Finch would be impressed." "It's been a labor of love," Zara admitted. "There's something satisfying about coaxing life from the soil, about creating beauty and nourishment with your own hands." Tucker nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's how I feel about the ranch, about building something lasting and worthwhile." They continued walking. their conversation flowing naturally from the garden to books they had read, to memories of childhood, to hopes for the future. For the first time since they had met, they were simply two people enjoying each other's company, the circumstances of their meeting temporarily set aside. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they paused near the corral where several horses grazed peacefully. Tucker leaned against the fence, watching the animals with obvious affection. "They're beautiful," Zara said, standing beside him. "They're freedom," Tucker replied softly. "When I was a boy, after Sarah was taken, riding was the only time I felt truly free. Like I could outrun all the sadness and anger." Zara hesitated, then placed her hand lightly on his uninjured arm. "Did you ever find her? Sarah, I mean." Tucker shook his head, his expression darkening. "Not in time. By the time I was old enough to go looking, she was already gone. I found the plantation where she'd been taken, but she'd died 2 years earlier. Worked to death, they said, though they used prettier words." "I'm so sorry, Tucker," Zara said, her heart aching for the boy he had been and the man who still carried that grief. "It's why I can't abide slavery in any form," he continued, his voice low and intense. "Why I couldn't walk away when I saw you on that auction block. No human being should ever be treated as property." Without thinking, Zara slipped her hand into his. "You gave me back my freedom that day. I can never thank you enough for that." Tucker looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. The fading sunlight gilded her features, highlighting the strength and gentleness that had drawn him from the beginning. "You don't need to thank me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Seeing you here, flourishing despite everything you've been through, that's all the thanks I need." Their eyes held, and in that moment, Zara knew with absolute certainty that what she felt for Tucker Reeves was far more than gratitude. It was love, deep and true and frightening in its intensity. The moment was broken by Levy's voice calling them for supper. Tucker squeezed her hand gently before releasing it, and they walked back to the house in a silence that was both comfortable and charged with unspoken feelings. That night, as Zara lay in bed reflecting on the day's events, she realized that something fundamental had shifted between them. The lines of employer and employee, rescuer and rescued had blurred, replaced by something more equal, more profound. Whether Tucker felt the same remained to be seen, but for the first time since arriving at Clearwater, Zara allowed herself to hope for a future that included more than just a position as housekeeper. The next 2 weeks passed in a similar fashion. As Tucker's arm began to heal, his restlessness decreased, and he seemed to find contentment in spending time with Zara. They fell into a routine of morning walks, with Tucker telling her more about the ranch and his plans for its future. In the afternoons, while Zara attended to her duties, Tucker would often sit nearby, reading or simply watching her work with an expression that made her heart beat faster whenever she caught him looking. Levy observed these developments with barely concealed satisfaction, occasionally making comments that caused both Tucker and Zara to blush. The ranch hands, too, seemed to accept the changing relationship between their boss and the housekeeper with good-natured tolerance. When Dr. Williams returned to check on Tucker's arm and pronounced it healing well, he removed the splint and replaced it with a lighter bandage. "Another week of limited use," he instructed, "then you can gradually return to normal activities, but no breaking horses for at least a month." Tucker nodded, clearly relieved to be progressing toward recovery. After the doctor left, he found Zara in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Good news," he said, holding up his arm with its new, less restrictive bandage. "Doc says I'm healing well." "That is good news," Zara replied, genuinely pleased. "Though I hope you'll continue to be careful." "I will," he promised. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something." He seemed unusually nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "There's a social in town next Saturday, dancing, food, that sort of thing. I was wondering if you might like to attend, with me." Zara's heart skipped a beat. As your housekeeper," Tucker shook his head, taking a step closer. "No, Zara, as my guest, as the woman I." He hesitated, then continued more softly, "As the woman I care for." The wooden spoon Zara had been using to stir the stew slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering against the pot. "You care for me, very much," Tucker admitted, his blue eyes serious. "I've been trying to find the right moment to tell you, but—" He ran his good hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "I'm not good with words, Zara, but these past weeks, getting to know you, seeing your strength and kindness, you've become precious to me." Zara's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he must hear it. "Tucker, you don't have to say anything now," he interrupted quickly. "I know our situation is complicated. I know you might still feel indebted to me for what happened in Copper Creek. But I want you to know that I see you as an equal, not someone who owes me anything." "Is that why we haven't?" Zara struggled to find the right words. "Why I haven't courted you properly?" Tucker supplied with a small smile. "Partly. And partly because I wasn't sure if you could ever see me as anything but the man who purchased your freedom." Zara moved around the kitchen table to stand before him. Gathering her courage, she placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating as rapidly as her own. "I see you, Tucker Reeves. I see the man who values human dignity above all else. The man who works tirelessly for what he believes in. The man who treats everyone with respect and kindness." She took a deep breath. "The man I've come to love." For a moment, Tucker simply stared at her as if unable to believe what he had heard. Then, with a sound that was half laugh, half groan, he wrapped his good arm around her waist and pulled her close. "Say it again," he whispered, his face inches from hers. "I love you, Tucker," Zara repeated, her voice stronger now. "Not out of gratitude or obligation, but because of who you are." The kiss, when it came, was gentle at first, a question asked and answered. Then, as Zara's arms wound around his neck, it deepened into something more profound, a promise, a beginning. When they finally parted, both breathless, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Zara Matthews. I think I began falling for you the moment I saw you standing on that auction block with your head held high, refusing to be broken. And I fell for you when you said I was priceless," she replied softly. "When you treated me with dignity when no one else would." A discreet cough from the doorway broke them apart. Levy stood there, a broad grin on his face. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you might want to know that the stew is boiling over." Zara gasped and hurried back to the stove, where the pot was indeed bubbling over the rim. As she moved it off the heat, her cheeks flaming with embarrassment, she heard Tucker laughing, a full, rich sound that she had rarely heard from him before. "Something funny?" she asked, trying to sound stern despite the smile tugging at her lips. "Just thinking that Mrs. Finch never had this problem when she was cooking," Tucker teased. "She was never distracted by declarations of love in her kitchen." "That you know of," Levy interjected with a wink. "She was quite the beauty in her day, according to Mr. Finch." The three of them laughed together, and in that moment, Zara felt a sense of belonging she had thought lost forever after her parents' deaths. Clearwater wasn't just a place of employment anymore, it was becoming home in the truest sense of the word. The social in town proved to be a turning point in Tucker and Zara's relationship. Dressed in her best gown, a blue silk that Tucker had insisted on buying for her when they stopped at the general store earlier that week, Zara felt like a different person from the desperate young woman who had been auctioned in Copper Creek's town square. As Tucker led her into the town hall, which had been decorated with paper lanterns and wildflowers for the occasion, heads turned and whispers followed them. Word had spread about the circumstances of Zara's arrival at Clearwater Ranch, and curiosity was evident in many faces. "Ignore them," Tucker murmured, his hand warm at the small of her back. "They'll find something else to gossip about soon enough." Zara held her head high, drawing strength from Tucker's presence beside her. "I'm not ashamed of how we met," she said quietly. "You saved me that day in more ways than one." Tucker's eyes softened as he looked down at her. "You saved yourself, Zara. I just gave you the chance." The evening progressed pleasantly, with Tucker introducing Zara to neighbors and friends from the surrounding ranches. Most were welcoming, though a few of the women regarded her with thinly veiled suspicion. Zara met their scrutiny with polite smiles and gracious conversation, determined not to give anyone reason to think poorly of her or, by extension, of Tucker. When the musicians began to play, Tucker led Zara onto the dance floor. Despite his still healing arm, he moved with confidence, guiding her through a waltz with the same gentle strength he showed in everything he did. "I didn't know you could dance," Zara said, surprised by his skill. Tucker smiled, the expression lighting his entire face. "My mother insisted that both Levy and I learn. She said a gentleman should know how to dance properly, even if he lived on a horse farm in Kentucky." "She was a wise woman," Zara replied, enjoying the feel of his hand at her waist and the way they moved together in perfect harmony. "She would have liked you," Tucker said softly. "She valued courage and kindness above all else." As they continued to dance, Zara became aware that they were being watched not just with curiosity but with approval. Tucker Reeves was respected in the community, and his clear attachment to her was being accepted, if not yet fully embraced. Later in the evening, as they stepped outside to enjoy the cool night air, Tucker drew Zara away from the lantern-lit porch to a quieter spot beneath a large oak tree. The music from inside drifted out to them, a gentle backdrop to the cricket song and distant coyote calls. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Tucker asked, his face half in shadow. "Very much," Zara replied honestly. "It's been a lovely evening." Tucker took both her hands in his expression turning serious. "Zara, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Her heart began to race. "Yes." "Your position at Clearwater as housekeeper, it was never meant to be permanent unless you wanted it to be. I want you to know that you're free to go whenever you wish, to make your own way if that's what you want." Zara felt a momentary pang of disappointment, followed by confusion. Are you asking me to leave?" "No," Tucker exclaimed, tightening his grip on her hands. "God, no, I'm trying badly to make sure you know that what I'm about to ask comes with no obligation, that you always have choices." Understanding dawned, and with it, a surge of hope so strong it nearly took her breath away. "Tucker, what are you asking?" He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "I'm asking if you might consider a different position at Clearwater." "Not as my housekeeper, but as my wife." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold band set with a single perfect pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Levy insisted I should have it when I told him what I intended to ask you tonight." Zara stared at the ring, then at Tucker's face, illuminated now by a shaft of moonlight filtering through the oak leaves. His expression was a mixture of hope and vulnerability that made her heart ache with tenderness. "Tucker Reeves," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm her, "from the moment you said I was priceless, you've shown me what true value means. You've given me back not just my freedom but my sense of worth." She took a deep breath. "Yes, I will marry you. Not out of obligation or gratitude, but because I love you with all my heart." The joy that transformed Tucker's face was something Zara knew she would remember for the rest of her life. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying everything words could not: passion, promise, and a future built on mutual respect and love. When they returned to the dance floor, Tucker's arm proudly around Zara's waist and her mother's ring gleaming on her finger. The whispers that followed them were now tinged with congratulations rather than speculation. By the end of the evening, word had spread throughout the gathering, and they found themselves accepting good wishes from friends and neighbors alike. The ride back to Clearwater beneath a canopy of stars was filled with plans and dreams. They decided on a small wedding at the ranch in 1 month's time, with only close friends and neighbors in attendance. "I want to start our life together without delay," Tucker said, his voice husky with emotion. "I've waited long enough to find you, Zara Matthews." "And I you," she replied, her heart so full it seemed impossible it could contain such happiness. Levy was waiting up for them when they returned, his knowing smile widening into a grin when he saw the ring on Zara's finger. "About time," he declared, embracing first Zara and then his brother. "Welcome to the family, officially." The following weeks passed in a blur of preparations and anticipation. Word was sent to the few distant relatives Tucker and Levy had maintained contact with, though none were expected to make the journey on such short notice. Zara, having no family of her own, found herself embraced by the small community that had become her home. Mrs. Williams from the general store insisted on helping with Zara's wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory silk with pearl buttons and delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. The wives of neighboring ranchers organized a gathering to present Zara with household gifts and share advice about married life that left her blushing but grateful for their acceptance. Throughout it all, Tucker was a constant presence, his love evident in every glance, every touch, every moment shared. If there were those who disapproved of their match or whispered about her past, Zara paid them no mind. The happiness she had found at Clearwater was worth more than the good opinion of those who judged without understanding. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a sky of impossible blue stretching over Clearwater Ranch. The ceremony was held in the courtyard, which had been transformed with wildflowers, ribbons, and lanterns for the occasion. Levy stood as Tucker's best man, while Mrs. Williams, who had become a dear friend to Zara, stood as her matron of honor. As Zara walked toward Tucker, wearing her ivory gown and with her copper-brown hair adorned with wildflowers, she felt none of the nerves or uncertainty that might have been expected. Instead, there was only a deep, abiding certainty that this was right, that in Tucker Reeves, she had found not just a husband but a partner, a friend, and a love that would endure. The minister, brought in from Tucson for the occasion, spoke of commitment and partnership, of building a life founded on mutual respect and shared values. When it came time for their vows, Tucker took Zara's hands in his voice strong and sure. "Zara Matthews, from the moment I saw you, I knew you were someone extraordinary. You've shown me what true courage looks like, what it means to face adversity with dignity and grace. I promise to love and cherish you all the days of my life, to be your partner in all things, and to never forget that what we have together is priceless beyond measure." Tears glistened in Zara's eyes as she spoke her own vows. "Tucker Reeves, you saw value in me when others saw only profit. You gave me back my freedom and, more importantly, helped me find my own strength again. I promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings, to be your comfort in sorrow and your companion in joy, and to love you faithfully until my last breath." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Tucker's kiss was a seal on their promises, witnessed by those who had come to celebrate with them. The cheer that rose from the gathered friends and neighbors echoed off the mountains, a joyful affirmation of their union. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with food and drink, music and dancing, and tales told of both bride and groom that brought laughter and occasional tears. As sunset painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Tucker led Zara away from the festivities to a quiet spot near the creek that gave Clearwater its name. "Happy, Mrs. Reeves?" he asked, drawing her into his arms. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "It still seems like a dream sometimes, that day in Copper Creek, coming here, falling in love with you." "If it's a dream, then I never want to wake up," Tucker said, tilting her face up to his for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they returned to the celebration, it was to announce their departure for their wedding night. Amid good-natured teasing and heartfelt good wishes, they made their way to the main house, where Tucker had prepared a surprise for his bride. The master bedroom, which Zara had never entered during her time as housekeeper, had been transformed. Fresh flowers filled vases on every surface, their fragrance sweetening the air. Candles cast a warm, golden glow over the room, highlighting the new quilt on the bed, a wedding gift from the women of the neighboring ranches, each square stitched with care and good wishes. "It's beautiful," Zara whispered, moved by the thought that had gone into creating this haven for their first night as husband and wife. Tucker closed the door behind them, his expression a mixture of tenderness and desire that made Zara's heart race. "You're beautiful," he said, drawing her into his arms. "My wife, my love." The kiss that followed was different from those they had shared before, deeper, more urgent, filled with a passion they had held in check until this moment. As Tucker's hands moved to the buttons of her wedding dress, Zara felt a momentary shyness, then a rising tide of desire that swept away all hesitation. Their coming together was everything Zara had dreamed it might be: tender and passionate, a physical expression of the love that had grown between them since that fateful day in Copper Creek. In Tucker's arms, she found not just pleasure but a profound sense of belonging, of being truly seen and cherished for exactly who she was. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms with her head on his chest, Zara felt a contentment so complete it brought tears to her eyes. "What is it, love?" Tucker asked, brushing away a tear with his thumb. "I was just thinking about how different my life might have been," she said softly, "if you hadn't come to Copper Creek that day, if you hadn't spoken up." Tucker's arms tightened around her. "But I did. And now we have this each other, Clearwater, a future to build together." "A family someday?" Zara asked, a question that had been in her heart but unspoken until now. Tucker's smile was radiant in the candlelight. "Nothing would make me happier than to raise children here with you. Little ones with your courage and spirit. And your kindness and integrity," Zara added, leaning up to kiss him softly. As the candles burned low and the sounds of the wedding celebration faded into the quiet of the night, Zara and Tucker spoke of their hopes and dreams for the years ahead. They would expand the ranch, perhaps add a school for the children of Clearwater and the neighboring properties. They would continue Tucker's work with horses, with Zara taking an active role in the business now that she was no longer just a housekeeper but a full partner in all aspects of ranch life. And through it all, they would remember the lesson they had learned in the most unexpected way, that true value isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the worth we place on each other's humanity, dignity, and love. 5 years later, Clearwater Ranch had grown and prospered beyond even Tucker's ambitious dreams. The horse breeding operation had gained a reputation throughout the territory for producing the finest stock, and the addition of a small apple orchard, Zara's special project, had proved surprisingly successful in the valley's microclimate. But the greatest joy for Tucker and Zara was their family. 3-year-old Sarah, named for Tucker's sister, had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. And 6-month-old James, named for Zara's father, had already shown signs of inheriting Tucker's easy way with animals, gurgling with delight whenever he was taken to the stables. Levy had married 2 years earlier a young widow from Tucson, who had come to teach at the small schoolhouse that now stood at the edge of Clearwater property. They had built their own home a short ride from the main house, close enough for family meals and shared work, but with the privacy a newly married couple deserved. The original ranch hands, Miguel, Jack, and Charlie, had stayed on, now joined by several others as the operation expanded. Miguel's nephew had recently arrived from Mexico, showing a gift with horses that rivaled Tucker's own. On this particular evening in late spring, with the children tucked into bed and the day's work complete, Tucker and Zara sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the Dragoon Mountains in shades of purple and gold. Tucker's arm was around Zara's shoulders, her head resting comfortably against him. "I received a letter today," Zara said after a comfortable silence. "From Mrs. Holloway in Copper Creek." Tucker raised an eyebrow. "The shopkeeper's wife. What news does she have?" "She wrote to tell me that the practice of dead auctions has been outlawed in the territory," Zara replied, satisfaction evident in her voice. The territorial legislature passed a law last month prohibiting the sale of individuals for debt repayment. She thought we would want to know. Tucker's face lit with genuine pleasure. That is good news. It's been too long in coming. She also mentioned that she tells my story, sometimes our story, Zara continued, to remind people that change is possible, that standing up for what's right can make a difference. Tucker pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. Your story was always worth telling, Zara Reeves. From that first moment when I saw you standing tall despite everything, I knew you were someone exceptional. Zara turned in his arms to face him directly. We made this story together, Tucker. The day you said I was priceless, you changed both our lives. For the better, I hope, Tucker asked, though the question was asked with the confidence of a man who already knew the answer. For the better in every way, Zara assured him, leaning in for a kiss that still held all the tenderness and passion of their first. As twilight deepened into night and the first stars appeared in the velvet sky above Clearwater Ranch, Tucker and Zara Reeves remained on their porch, talking quietly of the past they had overcome, and the future they continued to build, a future founded on the understanding that every human life has value beyond measure, and that love, freely given and freely returned, is truly priceless.